They laughed behind your back, rolled their eyes when you spoke, quietly bet on your failure like it was entertainment. They don't say it out loud, but they think you're not enough. And maybe, deep down, part of you started believing them too. But here's the part they never expect. When you stop talking and start building. When you stop explaining and start moving. Because nothing slices through doubt like quiet execution. And by the time they realize what you are really capable of, you'll already be gone, too far ahead for them to catch up. Most people only respect results. That's the brutal truth. You can explain your plans, your dreams, your reasons all day long, but if there's nothing to show for it, they won't take you seriously. They'll nod politely, maybe give you a fake, "That's awesome," but deep down, they're just waiting for you to fall flat. That's the world we live in, and if you haven't felt that yet, just wait. At some point, you'll hit a moment where the people closest to you stop believing in what you're trying to do. You'll see it in their body language, in the way they stop asking how things are going, in how they change the subject when you talk about what you're building. It stings. Not because you need their validation, but because you thought they'd at least understand. But here's the part no one tells you. That doubt. That silence. It's fuel. When someone underestimates you, they give you leverage. They're showing their hand. They're revealing they expect nothing from you. So when you finally make your move, the impact hits 10 times harder. Because they weren't ready, they weren't watching, and they never saw it coming. That's why the best response to doubt isn't a speech. It's not a tweet. It's not a quote about proving people wrong. The best response is disappearing into your work until your results become undeniable. Think about it. How many times have you tried to convince someone with words? How many times have you laid out your plan, explained your strategy, shared your excitement, and all you got in return was a lukewarm, "We'll see"? It's not personal. People are wired to doubt what they can't immediately see. So stop trying to paint the whole picture for them. Let them stay blind for now. Your job isn't to convince anyone. It's to become so consistent, so locked in, that eventually they have no choice but to pay attention. And when they do finally notice, when they finally see what you've been building behind closed doors, it won't be because you asked them to look. It'll be because the results screamed louder than your words ever could. That's power. Not the kind that needs applause or praise, but the quiet kind. The kind that comes from knowing you kept going when no one believed. The kind that makes people rethink every single doubt they ever had about you. It starts with silence, with long nights, small steps, no recognition. It starts when no one's watching. That's where your real advantage is. Because while they're busy talking, laughing, assuming, you're building, you're preparing. And one day, when the time is right, the silence will break. But not with noise, with results that shut everyone up. People don't just doubt you. They put you in a box. A silent, invisible box with unspoken limits. Based on your past. Based on where you're from. Based on how you talk, how you look. Who you used to be. They build this version of you in their heads, and they expect you to stay there. The moment you try to step outside of it, to grow, to reach for more, they get uncomfortable. Not because they actually believe you'll fail, but because deep down, a part of them is afraid you won't. That's the part no one likes to admit. Doubt often comes disguised as concern, but underneath it, there's fear. Not of your failure, but of your success. Because if you make it, if you actually pull it off, then what excuse do they have? What happens to their comfort if you shatter the ceiling they've been sitting under their whole life? That's why they'll throw passive comments your way. Little digs, subtle sarcasm. You really think you can do that? Don't get your hopes up. Maybe have a backup plan, just in case. It all sounds reasonable on the surface, but it's designed to plant seeds of hesitation. And if you're not careful, those seeds will grow. But here's where you flip the script. You don't argue. You don't explain yourself. You just keep moving, quietly, relentlessly. Because nothing makes people more uncomfortable than watching someone they underestimated become someone they can't even reach anymore. It's not about ego. It's about showing yourself that you were never the problem. Their doubt wasn't about you. It was about them, their limits, their fears, their small view of what's possible. You just happened to be the mirror that exposed it. So let them talk. Let them underestimate. Let them roll their eyes and call your dream unrealistic. That's fuel. That's leverage. Because while they waste time laughing, you're learning. While they're sitting in circles gossiping, you're stacking wins in silence. And there will come a moment, maybe months from now, maybe years, when they look at you and realize they don't even recognize you anymore. That's the moment everything changes. When the same people who doubted you start asking how you did it. When they pretend they always believed in you. When they rewrite history to make it look like they supported you the whole time. But you'll know the truth. You'll remember the silence, the fake smiles, the subtle jabs. And you won't need revenge. You won't need to rub it in. Because your success will say everything for you. That's the art of letting your actions speak. It's not about proving them wrong with noise. It's about building something so undeniable that they're forced to sit with the fact that they got it completely wrong. And by then, it'll be too late for them to catch up. The hardest part isn't the doubt. It's the isolation that comes with it. The silence when people stop checking in. The feeling that no one really sees the work you're putting in. You show up, day after day, grinding in the dark, while the rest of the world scrolls past like you don't exist. And in those moments, it's easy to question everything, to wonder if you're wasting your time, to ask yourself why you're even trying so hard when no one seems to care. That's when most people give up, not because they weren't capable, but because they let loneliness convince them they were invisible. But you have to understand something. The breakthrough never comes when everyone's watching. It comes in the quiet. It comes after the 100th rep when no one's clapping. After the 50th failure that no one sees. After the nights where you talk to yourself just to stay sane. That's where the foundation is built. That's where your future self is carved, through the repetition, the discipline, the silence. Because the truth is, growth happens before the recognition. And the longer you can stay focused without applause, the more dangerous you become. It's like working with a time bomb, except the countdown is your own effort. Every small move you make is another tick closer to that moment where everything explodes into visibility. But most people never make it to the blast. They quit 5 seconds too early. They walked away when the pressure was at its peak, not realizing that pressure was the signal. They were right at the edge. You have to train yourself to endure that space, that gap between effort and reward. Because that's where greatness hides. Not in motivation, not in hype, but in those lonely hours where you choose to show up anyway. And this is where your silence becomes your weapon. Because while they assume you're not doing anything, you're becoming something they'll never be ready for. Every representative, every decision to keep going, every early morning, every late night. That's a message. You're speaking without saying a word. You're telling the world, I don't need your validation. I'll build it with or without you. And the world hears that, maybe not right away, maybe not even for months. But eventually, when the results show up, they'll all act surprised, as if it came out of nowhere, as if you just got lucky. But you'll know it wasn't luck. It was quiet, consistent, ruthless execution. And the best part? When your time comes, you won't even feel the need to say, I told you so. You'll be too focused on what's next. Because success isn't about proving anyone wrong. It's about proving to yourself that you were right to believe in something no one else could see. That vision you had, that fire inside you that no one else understood, it was never meant to be explained. It was meant to be shown. There's a shift that happens when you stop trying to be understood. When you let go of the need to explain yourself to people who've already made up their minds. It's liberating and dangerous. Because the moment you realize you don't need anyone's permission to become who you're meant to be, you start moving differently. You stop seeking approval. You stop announcing your goals. You just do the work, quietly, consistently, with a kind of calm aggression that doesn't need to shout because it knows exactly where it's going. Most people live loud when they're insecure. They talk too much about what they're about to do. They post every minor win to try and convince the world they're making progress. But deep down, they're still looking around, hoping someone claps for them, hoping someone notices. That's not power. That's desperation in disguise. True power, it's quiet. It's disciplined. It doesn't need an audience. Because the people who are really making moves are too busy executing to care whether you're watching or not. You become dangerous when your focus is stronger than your need for attention. When your obsession with growth outweighs your need for applause. That's when the shift happens. That's when your name starts getting mentioned in rooms you've never even entered. Not because you talked your way in, but because your results forced people to notice. That's when things start getting weird. The same people who doubted you start acting like they believed in you from day one. They rewrite history, hoping you don't remember what they said before. But you remember. You remember the fake support, the little jokes, the way they looked at you like you were delusional for wanting more. And maybe you forgave them. Maybe you even stayed quiet. But deep down, that memory burned, not as a grudge, but as fuel. Because nothing pushes a person further than being underestimated by the people they once looked up to. That sting? That's motivation that never runs out. That's the kind of pain you use, and you don't need to fight back with words. You fight back with results. You fight back by doing the thing they swore you couldn't. Not for revenge, but because you can. And that realization alone, that you're capable of creating something so real, so undeniable without anyone's help, is the ultimate shift. It's when you stop waiting to be discovered and decide to become undeniable. That's when they start watching closely. Suddenly they want to know what your routine is, who your circle is, what books you're reading. But by then, it's too late. You've already outgrown the version of you they tried to keep small, and they'll never catch up. Not because you ran, but because they stood still while you were building. One of the wildest things you'll ever experience is seeing people change their tone when you start to win. The same ones who dismissed you, doubted you, or straight up ignored you, suddenly shift. They start watching your stories, liking your posts, dropping comments like they've been in your corner the whole time. At first, It's confusing, then it's hilarious, because you realize it was never about you. It was about what you could give them. The moment they see value in you, they reappear. Not out of support, but out of self-interest, and this is where your silence becomes even more important. Because they'll try to get close again, try to realign themselves with your name now that it's gaining weight. They'll say things like, "I always knew you'd do it," or "I was just trying to keep you grounded." Nah, that's revisionist history. That's guilt dressed up as support. You don't need to call them out. You don't need to clap back. You just let your track record speak for itself. Because the real ones never needed proof. They believed before it made sense, and those are the only people you bring with you. But here's the key. Don't let success turn you bitter. Don't let the recognition change your reason. You didn't start this journey to impress them. You started because something inside you had to be built. Something that kept you up at night. Something that made you feel crazy because no one else could see it. That inner fire? That's still the mission, not the followers, not the credit, not the validation. That's all noise. And if you start chasing that, you lose your edge. What makes you powerful is that you're willing to be invisible for a while. You're willing to work without claps, without likes, without external motivation. Most people can't do that. They need attention to stay consistent. But not you. You learned how to breathe in the dark. You learned how to stay sharp without the spotlight. That's why your results hit different. Because they came from a place of real hunger, not fake hustle, not trend chasing, real, relentless work. And what's even crazier, the higher you go, the quieter it gets. Not louder, not more glamorous, just quieter, more focused. You stop needing to explain your moves. You just move. You stop needing to prove anything. You just are. And the ones who doubted you, they get left behind, trying to figure out how you did it. But they'll never understand, because they only showed up when it was easy. When it was already proven, they don't get to be part of the journey. They only get to watch, and you. You keep going, not out of spite, but because you finally understand who you are when no one's watching. That's what makes you unstoppable. There's a point you'll reach where you stop expecting people to clap because you finally understand. Most people are too distracted, too insecure, or too afraid to celebrate someone else's growth. They see your rise as a reflection of what they're not doing. Your discipline reminds them of their laziness. Your progress makes their excuses harder to believe. That's why they distance themselves. That's why they go silent instead of supportive. And at first you take it personal. You think maybe you did something wrong. But you didn't. You just started moving in a way that exposed their comfort. When you start choosing discipline over distraction, people notice. When you stop showing up to every event, stop engaging in mindless small talk, stop wasting time doing what everyone else is doing, it makes people uncomfortable. Not because you've changed in a bad way, but because your growth challenges their stagnation. You're a mirror now, and some people don't want to see their reflection. That's why they call you different. That's why they say, "You're acting weird," or "You've changed." And they're right. You have changed. You stopped settling. You stopped explaining yourself to people who never cared to understand. You stopped living small so others could feel big. That's not arrogance. That's evolution. And if your evolution makes people uncomfortable, so be it. That's not your burden to carry. You're not here to fit in. You're here to level up, quietly, ruthlessly, relentlessly. Because you've seen what it looks like to stay the same. and you've decided that's not your story. You're not going to be the one who talks about what could have been 10 years from now. You're not going to be the person who blames life or timing or other people for why they never made a move. You're done with excuses, done with waiting, done with shrinking to make others comfortable. Let them misunderstand you. Let them mislabel your silence as weakness. Let them gossip. While they waste energy trying to figure you out, you're already 5 steps ahead, building something they'll wish they had paid attention to. And when it's done, when the vision becomes real, they'll all act shocked. But by then, you won't care. You'll be too focused on what's next, because that's how real growth works. It doesn't stop just because people finally noticed. It accelerates. And here's the wild part. They'll try to come back. Not because they believe in you, but because they believe in your success now. There's a big difference. Some people love the idea of success. They just don't want to go through the struggle that builds it. They want the finish line without the race. And when they see you winning, they want a piece. But they weren't in the gym with you. They weren't in the trenches. They don't get to eat off a plate they never helped carry. You're building something sacred, something real. Keep it moving. Keep it silent. And when it's time, let the results speak loud enough that you never have to say a single word. At some point, you realize that doubt doesn't just come from strangers. It comes from the ones closest to you, friends, family, people who watched you grow up, who you start to learn the difference between love and support. Because they're not always the same. Someone can love you deeply and still not have the capacity to support your vision. And that's okay. You don't have to hate them. You just have to stop waiting for their permission. Stop needing them to understand a mission that was never theirs to begin with. Because while they're still trying to fit you into the version of you that made them comfortable, you're building a version of yourself that terrifies their idea of what's possible. And here's where it gets real. The more you level up, the more you'll be forced to walk alone. Not because you want to, but because not everyone is built for the path you're on. The air gets thinner the higher you climb. Fewer people, fewer distractions, fewer attachments. And while that sounds lonely, it's actually where your clarity gets sharp, where your focus gets surgical, where you start building not just for survival, but for legacy. Let them talk, let them guess, let them assume you're being distant or cold now. What they don't understand is that your silence isn't distance. It's discipline. You're not ignoring them. You're building you. And that takes a kind of isolation that most people will never understand, because they've never had to sit with themselves long enough to face their potential. You're not doing this to prove anyone wrong. You're doing it to prove yourself right. That the voice inside you that said you were meant for more, it wasn't lying, it was preparing you. And now, you're answering that call with your actions, not your words. People will swear they support you until your success demands that they look at themselves. That's when the truth slips out. It shows in their silence when something good happens for you. It shows in how they stop clapping once the wins start stacking. It shows in the weird tension they bring when you're just trying to share something you're proud of. They'll claim they're happy for you, but their energy says otherwise. And if you've ever felt that shift, you know exactly what I mean. It's like walking into a room with your light on and suddenly everyone's uncomfortable with the brightness. But here's what you learn real quick. Your growth will cost you people who were never truly rooting for you to begin with. Not everyone who starts the journey with you is meant to finish it by your side. And that's not betrayal, that's clarity. The higher you go, the more your circle shrinks. Not because you're pushing people away, but because elevation exposes what's real. You can't take everyone with you. Some people are only meant for a certain version of you, the one who is still doubting, still hesitating, still dreaming but not yet doing. The moment you switch from talker to executor, the dynamic shifts. And you'll start to see it in little ways. People get distant. Conversations get shallow. You stop being invited to things. Or worse, they start throwing shade disguised as jokes. "Oh, look at you now, Mr. Big Time. Don't forget about us when you're famous." At first you laugh, but then it starts to hit different. Because beneath those words is a resentment they can't admit out loud. They see you evolving, and rather than be inspired, they feel threatened. Not because you did anything wrong, but because your growth is happening faster than their comfort can handle. But you can't shrink to soothe their insecurity. You can't play small just to keep the peace. You've got a vision now. You've got momentum. And momentum doesn't wait. It doesn't pause to reassure the people who didn't believe in it when it was just an idea. You owe it to yourself to keep going, not out of spite, but out of alignment. You're finally becoming the person you were meant to be. And anyone who makes you feel bad for that, let them go. Let them fall off. Let the silence be mutual. You're not cold. You're focused. There's a difference. And the people who get it, they won't need an explanation. They'll either keep up or fall back. But either way, you won't stop. Because your mission's too real now. Your results are too close. And all those nights you stayed quiet, all those moments you pushed through without recognition, they're about to pay off. Not in applause, but in freedom. You ever notice how people respect you more when they think they can't reach you anymore? It's wild. The same ones who overlooked you, who never returned your calls, who rolled their eyes when you shared your ideas. Suddenly, they want to reconnect. They want to talk. They want to check in. But it's not really about you. It's about what you've become, about what you've built. Because now you have leverage. Now they see value. And that's when it hits you. Respect isn't always about character or loyalty. In this world, respect often comes down to status. And when people think you're in a different league now, that's when the fake smiles show up. But the crazy part is, you don't even care anymore. Because somewhere along the way, while you were grinding in the dark, something inside you changed. You stopped needing to prove anything. You stopped craving approval from people who didn't believe when it mattered. Now, you've got proof. And proof speaks louder than promises ever could. You've got receipts. And receipts don't lie. Every early morning, every risk you took, every time you stayed focused when distractions were screaming for your attention, it all added up, and now, they're just catching up to the version of you that already knew this moment was coming. You've outgrown conversations that revolve around complaints. You've outgrown the need to be liked. You're no longer available for small talk, gossip, or negativity. Your mind is too occupied with strategy, execution, and protecting your peace. And because of that, people start calling you distant or different. Good. You are different. You're not the same person they used to know. And that's the whole point. You didn't sacrifice all those hours, all that energy, just to stay the same. You leveled up. Mentally, emotionally, spiritually. Let them say what they want. Let them build stories around your silence. While they're trying to interpret your next move, you're already on your next level. That's what silent success does. It creates mystery. It makes people curious. But the best part? You don't owe them an explanation. You owe it to yourself to keep building, to keep your head down, to stay locked in. Because what you're chasing now, It's not validation. It's freedom. Freedom to move how you want, to create what you want, to live life on your terms. That's what all the doubt, all the setbacks, all the isolation was for. You weren't just trying to win. You were trying to change everything, to break cycles, to build something that lasts. And now that the results are starting to show, the noise doesn't matter. Not the gossip, not the fake praise, not the sudden interest from people who used to overlook you. Because deep down, you know they're not clapping because they believed in you. They're clapping because they can't ignore you anymore. There's a moment, maybe it hasn't happened yet, or maybe it's already here, where everything clicks, where you look around and realize you don't need to chase anything anymore. You're not trying to prove anyone wrong. You're not trying to get them to see you, understand you, support you. You're not trying to be loud or be seen. You're just moving. Built different. Operating in a whole other lane now. Because you finally learned the difference between being noticed and being respected. And respect, the real kind, doesn't come from shouting. It comes from showing up so consistently, so quietly, that eventually no one can deny the weight you carry when you walk into a room. That's the final form. When your presence says what your mouth no longer needs to. When your work, your habits, your discipline speak before you do. And you don't need the applause anymore, because your wins are no longer about being seen. They're about being free. Free from doubt, free from proving, free from the version of you that used to beg for validation. You buried that version in the grind. And what came out on the other side? Someone untouchable, someone focused, someone they'll never fully understand, because they didn't stay long enough to watch the transformation happen. And here's the irony. They'll still talk. Some will say you got lucky. Some will pretend they were always on your side. Some will downplay your success to protect their ego. Let them. Let them run their mouths while you run your empire. Because the truth is, none of that matters now. You're not even the same person they doubted. You've outgrown their expectations. You've outpaced their understanding. And now, they're stuck watching your highlight reel, knowing they had front row seats and still missed it. You don't need revenge. You don't need to look back. You've already won. Because the real win wasn't the money, the status, or the recognition. It was the clarity, the self-trust, the peace that comes when you stop performing and just start being. That's what they never saw coming. That's what they couldn't measure. They thought your silence meant weakness. They thought your distance meant doubt. But all along, it meant war mode. You were in the lab. You were studying, building, growing. While they talked, you moved. While they laughed, you learned. While they watched, you became. And now? Now you don't even flinch when they speak your name. Because the version of you that cared what they thought, that person doesn't live here anymore. You replaced them with someone who lets results speak, loud, clear, unapologetically. And the final message they'll ever get from you, the one they'll never be able to ignore, is silence. The kind of silence that follows greatness, the kind that echoes long after the noise is gone. Tell them to subscribe.